Hi, welcome back to Art the Sponge Studio. I wanted to share the surprise that Art gave you some hints about last time. We talked about what makes art feel cozy, and we talked about how it was something that's like a blanket but not exactly a blanket. Well, Art is here to show you what his special cozy blanket is and how he drew some pictures of his cozy stuff to share. So here we go. Surprise! Here's Art snuggled up in his little beach blanket. He loves the colors. He loves tie-dye. Do you? Tie-dye's really cool because you get to see all the colors at once. Have you ever made a tie-dye before? Art the Sponge loves this beach blanket, but also loves his favorite stuff he called Camilla. And Art did this really cool drawing of Camilla, and he only used crayons. So I bet you have some crayons at home. Did you make yours at home? Did you share? I would love to see what your stuffies look like. Or even your special cozy blanket. Now, Mrs. Dalton was inspired by Art the Sponge's special blanket, and I made some of these because I knew Art would like that as a background in the studio. So when we do art and we do something close up, it's very cool because you get to see the texture of whatever object you're looking at. Now, the texture of the towel was soft, but also it's called terry cloth, and it has a really interesting, almost like bumpy, but still soft at the same time texture. Whereas Camilla's tail, if you see right here, is a little more fluffy and soft. So I tried to use different materials to make different kinds of textures. So for the close-up of the towel, I used chalk pastels, and I used it in different ways. So I'm gonna move my camera so you guys can see a little bit closer. On this one right here, I tried to get an up-close texture of what the actual cloth looks like. So I put something underneath, like a little texture rubbing tile, and I did my chalk on top, back and forth, to give it that quality. Okay, well, that's our roundup from week 1. Let's move on to episode 2. Hi, let's talk about materials. So, when we start our project, we want to have everything that we need right next to us. And there's lots of ways you can make this under the water scene. Some of the things you might have at home are crayons, and you might have a couple old markers. And like I said, when we did this project at school, we used oil pastels and watercolors, and both would work. So some kids might have oil pastels, and that's great. Some people might even have watercolor pencils or colored pencils, also great. You can use a lot of different things for this, but I'm gonna try to pick the most basic that probably everybody has. Some crayons and some old markers. So we're gonna be doing something called resist. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I have everything I need. Here's my crayons, and I'm gonna start by doing a few fish. I'm gonna show you a couple basic fish shapes. So when I make my fish, I like to think of 2 shapes. I like to think of the tail as a triangle, and I start with 3 dots. And when I connect those dots, I get the tail fin. Now this body is something that you've heard Miss Dalton use this little technique. So we make 2 dots. We do a stretched out rainbow for the top and a stretched out smile for the bottom. And you have your fish. Then you can add on the really cool stuff like the eyes, some lines that go from the top of the triangle out. You can make a curved line. You can make a little mouth. You can make patterns, and you can add different colors. And usually when we're doing one fish, they swim in a school, so schools have lots of fish, just like our school has lots of kids. So I'm gonna do the same thing again, and the more you practice, the better you get. So I'm gonna do my 3 dots. So 2 dots are on top, 1 is on the side, then they come together to make the tail fin. Then I'm gonna make my dot over here. I'm gonna do my rainbow. I'm gonna do my stretched out smile, and then I'm gonna add the details like the circle for the eye, maybe a little dot there, a little V for the mouth. Add on some patterns. And I'm gonna do one more, maybe swimming over here. Oh, I did it different this time, and that's okay. I just went ahead and started with the body. Totally fine. I just have to remember to add my dots in the back. Now, there's many different types of fish, as you know. Your fish can look different. Just like when I showed you in the slideshow, those examples from some other kindergartners who did this project some years back, you can see they did their fish all different ways. But I just wanted to show you a basic way of doing the fish. And of course, we're gonna add some sponges. So from the slideshow, you saw that there was something called a vase sponge. So a vase kind of looks like this. Kind of how I drew on episode 1, the art the sponge shape. Kind of like a triangle, but with curvy lines. And I'm just gonna make some lines going like this. And there was another cute little sponge that I learned about as I was researching. And that sponge was called a sea squirt, which I thought was really cute. And that sea sponge was blue. It was bright, bright, bright blue. And it kind of looked like this. Ovals, a bunch of little ovals, and some curved lines. And, you know, they're always discovering new things under the sea, so you can come up with your own and beautiful little creature from under the sea that nobody's discovered yet, especially deep, deep down. And speaking of deep, deep down, the cone sponge, the tube sponge, sorry, that Art the Sponge, his family is from, the deeper down they find these sponges, the darker the sponge looks. So the ones on the surface towards the where you go into the water, they're a lot lighter. So I'm adding another kind of sponge right here, but it's hard to see, but we're gonna do a little trick after. I'm gonna add some yellow. This will be nice and bright. And sometimes the inside of something looks a little darker. So I'm gonna add a little blue onto the yellow. I'm getting a green. I'm gonna give them a little bit of an outline so you can see them. And one of my favorites that I learned about was the art's great-grandmother, who was the red tree sponge. And I'm gonna put this red tree sponge way back here. This is a fun one to draw because it kind of looks like the wiggly branches of a tree. And I'm going to color that in. So this is the crayon part, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to add some more. I want a lot of wax. Crayons are made out of wax, and what we're doing today is called a wax resist. So the more bright colors, or even if you want something to stay white, color it with your white crayon, and you'll see a really cool surprise when we go over it with the paint. Trying to get these to look very bright. So I'm doing a pattern. And so if I do it to one, I do it to all. I'm trying to think of another color. Maybe some orange. So if you see this tail right here starting to turn a little bit brown, that's because these are complementary colors. Brown is created when you mix two colors that are opposite on the color wheel. So I just mixed blue and orange. I'm getting that brown color, which kind of looks good because it's like a little shady where the two parts meet. So that's a good thing. And let's see, I'm just gonna take out all my crayons. I'm gonna do their faces white. Why not? Let's see what happens. Ooh, something fun's happening. I see some of the blue is combining with the white. I also noticed this one doesn't have a little pupil. I'm gonna go back and add that. Oh, with the white, also fun, you can do the little breathing bubbles. Can't see them now, but you will. I'm gonna add the rest of the tail over here. I'm gonna add some more blue. And I wanna fill in, I think in the sea squirt sponge, I saw some of this color. And my vase sponge. Okay, now I have my background ready. Give this guy a little pupil, ready to go. So I'm thinking you might or you might not have watercolor paint at home. If you do have watercolor paint at home, that's awesome, and I would use that. And we talk about when we use watercolor paint, we wake up the paint by adding water. So you'll just need a little bit of water, your watercolor paint, and a brush. But if you don't, I'm going to teach you how to make some. I'm taking an old blue marker. Let's see how this works. This is actually a highlighter. What happens is the water is going to dissolve the marker. The stuff that's in the marker is kind of a liquid, and the tip of the marker is like a little piece of felt that delivers the liquid. And I'm also going to add some green because sometimes the ocean is green. And you can see it's starting to turn into paint. Maybe I used a little bit too much water because I have a very, very small paper. I'm just using copy paper, which is the kind that's in your printer at home. But you could use other kinds of paper, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to grab another, see what I have for other blue markers. Funny thing about markers, ooh, that was black. Let's see how that goes. It's like a little potion I'm making. Here's a light blue. Sometimes deep in the ocean, we get the look of dark, dark black. So I would wait a little bit of time, but because I want to show you how this is going to come out, I'm going to leave that like that, let those set for a minute, and get my brush. So it doesn't matter what kind of brush you have at home. I didn't bring many brushes home. I had a few. I found this fan brush, so that's a cool one. And I'm going to use this in my homemade paint and see what happens. Oh, it's really, really light. I should probably let those markers dissolve a little bit more. But you can see that the paper that has the crayon is not getting covered. So this is kind of like a light bluish gray, which I kind of like. Okay, so there's step one. And now I'm going to show you, when this is dry, how we can move on to step two, which is adding things on. So if you like working with collage, that's going to be our next part, that we can add a more three-dimensional aspect to this cool background already.